Hi, and welcome to Relax Radio Beyond Frequencies. My name is Sean Adams, and you are tuned in to The Decision, a special episode on Relax Radio. So, on this show, I will be interviewing Councillor Andrew Woods, who is the councillor for Canary Wharf Ward in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. Councillor Woods will be campaigning as an independent candidate for the position of Mayor of Tower Hamlets in the upcoming local elections that will be held on the 5th of May. Councillor Andrew Woods joins us now to talk about his vision for Tower Hamlets if he's elected mayor in the upcoming elections. Councillor Woods, welcome to the program. It is a massive privilege to have you with us on this show.
Okay, thank you.
So, can I start off by asking you, would you please give us some background on your policies and on yourself for the advantage of the listeners?
Okay, so I was first elected as a councillor for Canary Wharf Ward in May of 2014. So for the last 8 years, I've been a councillor, and for those 8 years, I've been an opposition councillor. So that means I've got a really good understanding of where Tower Hamlets does a good job, but mostly where it does a bad job. So one of the reasons for running as an independent is to kind of talk about the issues, including perhaps issues that people don't want to talk about, but also to suggest solutions to some of those problems as well. Because one of my concerns about this election is that we have these two heavyweight contenders. We have Mr. Lutfur Rahman, our former mayor, and the current mayor, John Biggs. And I was concerned that some of the conversations were about which one was the worst mayor in the past, and it would all be about the past. And I kind of wanted to focus much more about the future and about how this amazing place, Tower Hamlets, becomes an even better place to live and work and study in.
Thank you, Councillor. Also, can I ask you, what are your plans to further the lives of approximately 300,000 people in Tower Hamlets if you become mayor?
So I guess an important point is it's not 300,000 anymore. I think it's about 340,000 people. And reality is that Tower Hamlets is actually the fastest growing place in the United Kingdom. It's the densest place in the United Kingdom. And certainly the part of Tower Hamlets that I represent as a councillor, Canary Wharf, is the most important growth area in the whole of the United Kingdom. I sort of calculated last year that we have to deliver 1.04% of the total housing needs of the whole of England in a place that you can walk across in 30 minutes. So we've got towers of 75 stories in height. So a lot of my policy focus is about how you deal with the problems of building at such density. But we've also kind of got lots of other kind of existing problems as well. So actually my very first manifesto that I published was actually about children's services, because Tower Hamlets Council failed their children's services inspection back in 2017. And last year, Ofsted came back and looked at our SEND services and again found problems with it. So what I'm basically trying to do is identify all of those issues and then coming up with different solutions to those different problems. Because I think one of the problems that I have with Tower Hamlets Council is a kind of lack of attention to what I call quality of life. So because it's very much kind of run as a kind of what I call a silo organization. So one department is over here dealing with that problem, and that department is dealing with that problem, and that department is dealing with that problem. There's not really anybody, and that's what the role of the mayor should be, is kind of looking at everything all together and kind of making sure that everything works together and works effectively to make life in Tower Hamlets, safer, cheaper, because we've got a major, energy crisis coming and cost of living crisis, but also just a better place to live and work. And I can go through in more detail some of those particular manifesto kind of areas, but that's the general approach. And the last thing I'll say in this particular subject is I spend a lot of time on social media, so on Twitter, but also Facebook. I run a Facebook group called Canary Wharf and Isle of Dogs Residents. It's got about 33,000 members. So we're having conversations almost every day about problems and about what the solution to some of those problems kind of might be. Also using Nextdoor as well, but also just talking to people. So I had a long conversation on the phone with somebody earlier about his complaints in the north west of the borough. So that's how I kind of engage with people, and will continue to do that going forward. And therefore, all of the ideas I've got are kind of coming out of those very detailed, rich conversations with people on it, which I've been doing, pretty much for 8 years now, almost every day.
Thank you, Councillor Woods. Also, how do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in Tower Hamlets?
So one of the ways I just talked about, which is kind of engaging with people on a day-to-day level using social media. Obviously, not everybody's on social media. So if I was elected mayor, one of the things I would want to do is physically go out there and kind of, say I will be in Weavers Ward this Friday, or I will be in Bow Ward, next Thursday. I will be here. Please come and meet me. Make sure people are aware of that, so that I'm kind of open to people coming up to me, not just on social media as well, but very much I kind of want to continue those kind of conversations that I have already kind of going forward. But I think it's also very important to kind of change the culture of the council as well. The culture of the council today, and many councillors, is that they don't like talking to people. They don't like talking to residents. They're just in a bit of annoyance. So I really want to focus on the culture of the whole council. So it's not just me as the mayor that's listening to residents, but actually it's the wider council. So some of the ways of doing that would be to encourage more opportunities for residents to actually ask questions. So currently, there is no formal mechanism for a resident to come and ask a question at the council meeting. We used to have them in council meetings, but that got removed. So one of the things I want to put back in is maybe a 15-minute slot in every cabinet meeting agenda, where residents can come and ask us questions about stuff, and we can respond to that. We also, the council, do this very good annual resident survey. It's about 1,000 people that they survey. I want to sort of double that to 2,000 people, because then we'll get more detail about problems in individual areas, and we'll do that every year to kind of get this sort of very good feedback every year as to what kind of job we're doing. But there are also ways of engaging with people. So I spent a lot of my time working on something called the Isle of Dogs neighbourhood plan. And neighbourhood planning is basically resident-led. So what we were doing in that neighbourhood plan is we set it up. So I did it half as a councillor, half as an ordinary resident. And basically what we did back in 2014 is we had these conversations with people, so saying, what do you think the problems are on the Isle of Dogs, and can we use neighbourhood planning as a solution? And the neighbourhood plan is basically where you as residents write planning policies. And it goes through this formal process of consultation. At the end of that process, an examiner checks your planning policies are, legally viable or not. There's then a referendum. So, for example, in the Isle of Dogs, we had our referendum last May. About 8 to 9,000 people voted in that referendum. 86% of the people who voted actually voted yes to approve the neighbourhood plan. But that process basically involved these very detailed conversations with people in 2014, 2015, 2016, and into 2017 as to what they thought the problems were locally and how planning policy could fix them. And as a result of those conversations, we sort of wrote a neighbourhood plan on the back of those conversations. And I think there's lots of other examples where I think if we talk to people, because the idea that I don't have all the best ideas, I don't know everything. That's true of council officers as well. They don't know everything about the best solutions and how things work. It's been really interesting that when the council website failed earlier this year, people on social media, within 20 minutes, worked out what the problem was, and it took the council 2 days to work out what the problem was. Is basically we didn't pay our bill for the router. So yeah, there are people out there with really good ideas, and I think part of the role of the mayor would be to kind of encourage those detailed conversations, but make sure that council officers are having those conversations with residents, with the businesses in Tower Hamlets, and the other stakeholders that we have, the NHS, the fire brigade, the police as well, to kind of collectively come up with the best solutions to some of our problems going forward. Developers as well, they all have a role to play.
Thank you, Councillor. Also, what is the main challenge that you foresee in the role of Mayor of Tower Hamlet?
So I think the biggest problem the mayor is going to have which is the existing problem, which is the culture and the organisation and the structure of Tower Hamlets Council. It's not a delivery focused organisation. It's a bureaucratic organisation. It's not even good at talking. Different departments don't talk to each other. So I think the biggest challenge of the mayor is not so much delivering policies, it's about changing the organisation to be a much more kind of customer resident focused organisation. As I just said, willing to talk to people, that is actually good at delivering stuff. And there are, examples from other London boroughs. So Barking and Dagenham are really good at delivering stuff because they set up this separate organisation called Be First, which is purely focused on delivering new homes and infrastructure. Council hasn't really done that, and in part because it's been distracted by building this new town hall in Whitechapel. So I think the main problem is actually fixing the council. Another example of our problems is that a lot of the senior staff are not from Tower Hamlets. So whenever we go out to recruit, for some reason, it's only people from outside of Tower Hamlets who are applying for these jobs. It's very rare to get anybody from inside the organisation to say, actually, I'd like to do that job. I've worked at a more junior level, but I'm willing to step up now. That very rarely happens. A very similar kind of linked problem to that is, and I know people don't like the term BAME, sort of black and minority ethnic, but roughly 59% of council staff are of a BAME background, but only 30% of our staff who are BAME actually earn more than £60,000. So it's very clear we've got a problem there in terms of the pay that we're paying people. And I think, again, it's mainly because a lot of the senior management who are paid these big sums of money, they're not from Tower Hamlets, they're coming in from elsewhere. And that's, again, I think one of the reasons why the council isn't very focused, because I think a lot of council officers, we have some really good council officers. I'm not saying these are bad people, but I don't think they're focused enough on actually getting stuff done for Tower Hamlets. So I think that's the main challenge for the mayor, is fixing, because until you fix the council, it's going to be very difficult to deliver all of the other stuff that you want to deliver.
Thank you, Councillor Woods. Now, based on what you said, you were talking about the fact that there is like an internal communication issue inside your council. Mm-hmm. So how would you go about changing that if you became mayor?
So I was saying earlier, I was talking about these silos, different departments. Even when I've been told stories of they sit next to each other and they still don't talk to each other. So one of the ways of doing that is a problem is that there is, for example, there is no council officer responsible for the Isle of Dogs. There's a council officer responsible for the pavements across Tower Hamlets. There's a council officer responsible for the streets across Tower Hamlets, but there's not a single person responsible for Wapping or Bow. So one of the things I want to do is create these teams of people who have a geographic responsibility. So there'll be a small team of people who are only responsible for everything within the Isle of Dogs. And they will be the people who then go talk to the other teams who have the kind of more specialist knowledge. So if you do have a problem on Marsh Wall, and to fix that problem, you have to talk to the 3 or 4 different departments, because they don't talk to each other today, is what we'll have is these small teams of people who will focus on fixing the problems on Marsh Wall, and then know who to talk to within the organisation to get some of those problems fixed. So that's a partial solution, but the other part is changing the culture so that people actually do talk to each other within the organisation and know what everybody else does. And I've seen this happen elsewhere in other places I've worked. It just hasn't happened in the council yet, I don't think.
And that is so true, Councillor, because, at the basis of any successful venture is the ability to communicate ideas and so forth. So as you so rightly said, without that, there is no real potential for the furtherance of, any agenda. So on another note, can I ask you, I read in your manifesto, the council manifesto, that funding cuts have been a major problem in Tower Hamlets. And I would welcome your thoughts on plans that would help with alleviating poverty in Tower Hamlets. But before that, I have to go for a short 2-minute break. So I would appreciate it if you bear with me until then. So we'll be right back on Relax Radio after a short break. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Relax Radio Beyond Frequencies. Now, don't forget, you can call or text us if you would like to call in, and maybe you have your own questions to ask Councillor Andrew Wood. The number to call us is 078 524 73473. So, right now, I am interviewing Councillor Andrew Woods, who is campaigning as an independent candidate for the position of Mayor of Tower Hamlet in the upcoming local elections that will be held on the 5th of May. So, Mr. Wood, you spoke a lot about your background. You gave us a brief description of your plans for the future should you are elected. Should you be elected mayor? So now I would also like to ask you. Funding cuts have been a major problem in Tower Hamlets. Can you tell us a bit about how you think the situation should be handled by the mayor, the upcoming mayor of Tower Hamlets?
So, first of all, yes, there have been sort of deep cuts in our government funding over the years. But what's really interesting is that those cuts were most severe between 2010 and sort of 2016. And I'm not saying they're completely over or we're out of the woods, but actually one of the problems the council faced this year is actually they got a lot more money from government than they were expecting. So our council finances are not as bad a position as the council like to pretend they are. So to give you some examples, we made a surplus or a profit from COVID. So the government gave us more money than we actually spent on COVID. So we ended the last financial year a couple of weeks ago with £8.6 million extra. We have £588 million of reserves in total. Most of that is kind of capital spend, but approximately about £100 million could be spent on a wide range of factors, because the council have kind of been building up this nest egg and building it up and not really spending the money quickly enough. So actually we're losing some of the value of that through inflation. And the other thing that council don't really talk about is there are other sources of income that the council get other than government funding. So yes, government funding has been cut, but what they don't talk about is we get something called new homes bonus from government, which is a reward, a bonus, even a bribe, you might say, for building lots of new homes. So we've had over £200 million of new homes bonus since 2011. Business rates has been a very important source of income, and that's a tax on business. So the more valuable the property or the shop or the office or the restaurant that you have, the more business rate you have to pay. And that's been very good for us in the past because we've had all that growth at places like Canary Wharf. So that's generated extra money for us. And the other big source of income has been council tax. And the council, so Mayor Lutfur Rahman froze council tax between 2010 and 2015, in part because the government helped him with extra money if he did that. But since then, council tax has gone up, above inflation every year, except election years. So for some strange reason, except in election years, Mayor John Biggs always increases the council tax rate by, 2, 3, 4% to the maximum possible. This year, it was only 1% because it's an election year. But what that does mean, and also with all the new buildings which are being built in Tower Hamlets, is actually we're getting lots of extra council tax income. So the financial situation of the council is not as difficult as some other councils. I mean, there are councils outside of London who have, very large elderly populations. They are in real difficulty. But one of the other things that Tower Hamlets Council has is that we're a very young borough, so we've actually got the lowest proportion of over 65s in the country. So we've got lots of young people paying council tax, but less kind of older people who are kind of one of the main users of normally, like a lot of councils, it's adult social care. It's their biggest budget item. It is here as well. But we don't have the same pressures on our budget that some of the other councils in England have. So actually, we're much better off financially than the council like to pretend. And we also have these very large reserves. So whoever the next mayor is could actually spend a lot of money, both building new things in terms of capital delivery, but also on new services. And one of the reasons why we have so much money is Tower Hamlets Council has always planned for the worst. So they sort of say, next year, the government are going to be really bad to us and they're going to cut our budget. So we need to cut our budgets before the government cut our budgets. But then what happens in that next year is actually the governments don't cut our budget or don't cut it that much, or actually in the last couple of years have given us a lot more money than we were expecting. So in this really weird situation where we made these big cuts because we thought the government were going to cut our budgets, and yes, they did cut them in the past, but that hasn't happened in the last couple of years. And I think that will be one of the really interesting things over the coming years, is what happens to council budgets. There are definitely some concerns on the horizon in terms of business rates I was talking about, because the working from home potentially is a threat to us, because if there are fewer people working at Canary Wharf, does that mean they should be paying less business rates? And there are also some other threats as well, but we shouldn't make cuts in the council budget until we know 100% for definite that the government are going to be cutting our budgets. And as I said, that hasn't happened in the last couple of years, because actually our budgets of our income from government has actually gone up.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, let's say someone's going out there to vote. Is there anything that people should know in particular about the voting process that you would like to share with them?
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple of very important kind of practical points. So first of all, obviously, the vote is on Thursday. So the polling stations will open at 7 o'clock in the morning, close at 10 p.m. If you go to the council website, it will say there will be a link. So if you put your postcode in, it will tell you where your nearest polling station. In most cases, it's the same polling stations that we used last May. There's only a couple of minor changes. You don't need to take your polling card with you. You can just turn up as long as you know your own name and address. You don't need a polling card. You don't need any ID. So one interesting thing is the government have just signed off a new Act of Parliament, which will mean that in future elections that you will need to take a photo ID to elections. That's not the case this Thursday. It's the old process of just kind of turning up. If you still got a postal ballot paper and you're worried about returning it in the post quickly enough, you can drop off your postal ballot paper at any of the polling stations. So in terms of when you're actually inside the polling station, you're going to get two pieces of paper. You're going to get the mayoral ballot paper, and that will have 7 names on it. And one of the names will be me, Andrew Woods, independent. It will not have a flag next to it, because being an independent candidate, I don't get like a sort of red rose or anything like that against my name. So the important thing about that ballot paper is actually there are 2 columns. There's a first choice and a second choice. And this is also the last election where you will have what's called a second preference vote. So the idea is that you will put your cross, so just do a nice neat cross in the box against your first choice candidate, who you most want to be the mayor. But what you've also got is a second column for your second choice. So let's say, for example, you think I'm the best, you put an X against my name. In my case, I'll be giving Councillor Rabina Khan my second preference vote, because I think she's a really good councillor and a really good candidate. So in that second column, I'll be putting an X against her name. But that will only be counted if she gets into the final top 2 candidates. So it's only the top 2 candidates that, let me back up a step. So what will happen is that first column with all the first choices will get counted first. If a candidate gets 50% or more of the votes, that's it, it's all over, they're the winner. But if the top candidate gets, 42% or something, the top 2 candidates will then have the second preference votes of all of the other candidates kind of added up and then added to those top 2. So for example, let's say one of the candidates you don't think is likely to win. So what will happen is their second choices will get added to the top 2. You don't have to use your second preference vote, but you need to definitely put an X in that first column, because if you don't do it, then your vote is invalid. Also, don't write on the ballot paper. You can use a pen if you want. The pencils are fine. The second ballot paper that you will get will be for the councillor ones. And that will be slightly complicated because different wards have different numbers of councillors. And this is a big problem in the past. So, for example, in Canary Wharf ward, there are 2 councillors, so you get 2 votes. In some wards, there are 3 councillors, so you get 3 votes. In some wards, there's only 1 councillor, therefore you only get 1 vote. So be very careful, because if you put in more X's than there are councillors, then your vote is invalid. Whereas let's say if there was 3 councillors and then you put only 1 X in, that will get counted, but in effect you've lost 2 votes. So definitely check how many X's you should put against the councillor ones, and that's first past the post. The candidates with the most votes wins. And what's interesting about Tower Hamlets is some of those councillor races will be really close. So, for example, in May 2018, in my own ward, there was 7 votes difference between the second, third, and fourth candidates. And there was a person who lost by 1 vote. In 2014, we had another ward. Again, there was 5 vote difference between the second, third, and fourth candidates. So in some of these councillor elections, like, every vote really does matter. So I would encourage you to make sure that you put in the correct amount of X's in for those councillor ones. And the last thing I'll say about councillors, they do a completely different job from the mayor. You know, they have no power, no responsibility, unless the mayor shares it with them if they're in the mayor's cabinet. They have some powers if they're on the licensing, planning, or pensions committee, but most of the job of councillors is to hold the mayor to account. It's to ask the mayor and his and their team kind of tough questions, to scrutinise what they do, and we do that through various scrutiny committees. And the other important role of councillors is to help residents, to ask questions on their behalf, to sort of provide these kind of like advice surgeries. So if people want to come see me, in the past, they would have gone to Cubitt Town Library every Saturday between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Either myself or my colleague, Councillor Peter Golds, would have been there. So for 16 years now, there's been a councillor in that library every Saturday between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock. That may not happen in the future because that depends on these election results. But we're there to basically help people, to provide advice and to ask questions of housing associations or the council on your behalf. And therefore, you know, councillors do this very different role. And the last thing I'll say in this is the mayor is all powerful. So if you want scrutiny, if you want democratic opposition, then you need to vote for opposition councillors. Because in May 2018, we got 42 Labour councillors and a Labour mayor, and only 3 opposition councillors, including Peter Golds and Rabina Khan, who I've just mentioned, and myself. And it's impossible to hold the mayor and his administration to account if you've only got 3 opposition councillors. So you really need to have a think, and I would urge people to vote tactically, or maybe to split their ballot and, you know, not just vote all one party line. But if you're in a ward that's voted for Green or Conservative or Liberal Democrats in the past, give them your vote, because it's the only way of making sure that we have enough opposition councillors elected.
Thank you, Councillor Woods. Right now, we have to go for a short break right now. But like you said, if anyone out there is planning to vote in Tower Hamlet in this upcoming election, I hope you found all that information useful, because that's definitely something to remember when you're going into the polling booths. Right now, we have to go for a short break, and I'll be right back after that. But don't forget, you can call in on this program. The number is 078-524-73473. That's 078-524-73473. You can call in and let your opinions be heard. You can also ask questions of Councillor Andrew Woods yourself. So I'll repeat that number one more time. 078-524-73473 is the number. So we'll be right back after a short break. You are tuned into The Decision with Sean Adams on Relax Radio Beyond Frequencies. Thank you for joining me on this program.
How easy is it to fire fast food workers? This is The Naked Show, and my name is Kyle. It's very easy to get fired at fast food. That is because they get fired for no valid reasons. Reasons like, Your nails are too long. Why aren't you smiling? You're fired. You don't look motivated. You're fired. You can't speak properly. You're fired. You're fired. You're fired. Now, these are valid reasons, are they not? No, they aren't. People are people. A lot of people go through a lot of things. They probably weren't motivated enough to do their work, but still, they showed up for it, no? They probably weren't motivated enough because of the way they've been treated at work. They probably didn't cut their nails because they didn't have the time. They do have another life outside of work, you know. The reason why they feel down is because they do a lot of work for a very little pay. A very common coincidence. The reason they aren't happy is because they are probably facing a real difficult time in their life. But what employers at fast food chains fail to see that no matter what negative impact had on their employees, they still showed up to work. This problem is what everyone fails to see because they are blinded by the power they have. Remember, fast food employers, no matter what they go through, they still showed up to work. This is The Naked Show, and my name is Kyle. Have a good day.
Hello and welcome back to Relax Radio Beyond Frequencies. This is The Decision with Sean Adams on Relax Radio. This is a special episode where we are interviewing Councillor Andrew Woods, an independent member of the Conservative group for the ward for Canary Wharf. And he has joined us now to talk about the future of his constituency if he's elected mayor. So once again, Councillor Wood, I would like to thank you so much for being a part of this program. And to everyone listening in, if you want to call in and offer your own questions up. If you have any questions that you would like to ask the councillor, the number is 078-524-73473. So let's move on into some more questions. Councillor, what are some of the key challenges that you have faced in your life so far in this journey to become mayor, and how did you overcome them?
Okay, I guess that's a good question. I wasn't quite expecting something kind of sort of that personal, I guess. So maybe I should explain why I got involved in politics and give a little bit of background. So I did talk about this kind of briefly in a video. So I was lucky enough to grow up in two places that had really good government. So the first place was Singapore. I actually grew up in Singapore when Lee Kuan Yew was the prime minister. He's not a perfect politician. There are definitely some issues in Singapore. But what I did see growing up in Singapore is every year the government doing a really good job improving things, and every year things got better. And that's been a continuous case throughout my life and time in Singapore. And then the other thing is that I'm half German. So every summer, well, in fact, every year, I go visit my mum in southern Germany, a little town called Memmingen. And it's an amazing place. It's got about 40,000 people. But in terms of the public facilities they've got, it's almost equivalent to Tower Hamlets, which is much bigger and got this population of more than 330,000 kind of people now. And they have these fantastic playgrounds. It's clean. Things are really well organized. So I find it very frustrating that when I go to Germany, kind of seeing how good local government can actually be. And then I come back to Tower Hamlets, and it's this really frustrating experience, kind of seeing what a mess it is, or just a lack of ambition, or not, dirty streets and things not being sorted out. So I grew up with that kind of luxury of seeing, good government in action, seeing, what could actually be delivered by proactive governments, and then being frustrated at sort of not seeing that happen in Tower Hamlets. So kind of one of the reasons I wanted to stand for mayor is to kind of talk about some of those international examples, but also things I've seen within the United Kingdom as well. So I've been talking a lot earlier this morning about something called youth zones, which is this kind of new type of youth centre, which I think are really fantastic. I'd like to bring some of those to Tower Hamlets, but that idea actually comes from Barking and Dagenham, because that's where I've seen it. There's also other examples elsewhere in the United Kingdom. So those are kind of the main drivers for me. And the other main driver for me getting involved in politics, ironically, is I worked in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for 2 years. And kind of working in Riyadh was very interesting, and working with all of my Muslim colleagues and kind of seeing how Saudi society was organized. And kind of one of the things I kind of decided is that after coming back from Riyadh was actually I wanted to get a lot more involved in civic society, because that's one of the things I noticed there was a difference between England and Saudi Arabia. Is in England, you have what I call civic societies. You have lots of people doing lots of different things and lots of charities. Whereas in Riyadh, it was basically outside of the mosques. There was very little in the way of civic society. So, for example, I came back to England, decided to become a school governor. So I was a local authority school governor in a girls' school in West London for a number of years. I was then chair of the patient panel at the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel, kind of like a voluntary role, kind of being the interface between patients and their families and the management. Didn't quite work out because the hospital failed its CQC inspection. So that role never really kind of took off. But those are some of the reasons I kind of got involved in politics, is the kind of sense of wanting to improve, Tower Hamlets and England more generally, because I got a strong sense that, that English government is not as good as people think it is. I think people, especially from outside of England, have this perception, or outside of the country, have this perception that we have this really good government in Great Britain and England specifically, and it's definitely not true. I think we've been trading on our reputation, and I think it's definitely been getting worse in recent years. And that's one of the reasons I got involved in politics, is to try and do something to deal with the fact that our political systems aren't very good at delivering for people, and all of the problems that we're creating. And we see all of these problems nationally as well as locally. So those are some of the reasons why I personally got involved in politics.
On the note of now, you just mentioned that that the UK government could be better, and that got me thinking about the cost of living, the energy crisis, and all that sort of thing. So I would put you the question: what would do you think the way Boris Johnson's government is going about the cost of living crisis? They're trying to build renewable power plants and that sort of thing. But is that really feasible in the short term, or could they be doing things differently to alleviate the crisis for common people in the United Kingdom right now?
Yeah, they could definitely be doing a lot more than what they're already doing. I know there's this £150 rebate that people get through their council tax either this week or next week. I mean, it will help. But given what's happening to energy costs and what will likely happen to food costs because of what's happening in Ukraine, it's a bit slow, it's a bit late. So on one hand, they're introducing these tax increases, so taxes are going up, national insurance in particular, but I don't think they're offering enough help to people. The council increased the council tax by 1%. I know it's not a lot of money, but one of the things I did is I did a budget proposal that proved actually is that we, this year we could do without a council tax increase. We could have kept it at zero. I know some other councils actually proposed reductions in their council tax. So, we could have done more because we've got so much money in our bank account. We can actually afford to be generous this year, but the council decided not to do it. And even worse, council tax went up by 1%, but the other fees and charges, so the charges for using things like libraries or sports facilities, they went up on average 4 to 5%. And some of them, like for street traders, so like Whitechapel Market street traders, their costs went up by 11% this year, which I thought was really bad, because those are the people who kind of, are selling food to some of the poorest people in our borough. So there's a lot of things that the local council could kind of do as well. I know a big problem, one of the things I've been surprised at the last couple of years, I just assumed this was the case, but a lot of council homes, Tower Hamlets homes, don't have double glazed windows. They still have single glazed windows, which mean they're losing heat during the winter, which means they have to have more heating on, and we've had double glazed windows in the United Kingdom for I remember doing it like 30 years ago. So I was really surprised when I found out that the council haven't actually delivered double glazed windows to every single one of their homes in Tower Hamlets, which I think is crazy given how much money we've actually got sat in the bank account. So there's definitely more that the council could do short term and long term to kind of help people deal with this financial crisis.
Thank you, Councillor Woods. Also, what are your plans for council tax if you get elected mayor?
So as I already said, this year I wanted to be a 0% increase. Obviously, the council didn't agree to that, so it did go up 1%. So it's entirely possible that next year, depending on what inflation is, I might be able to do that again. But one of the things I've already said in my manifesto is, if let's say your average wage goes up by this, or inflation goes up by this, that the council tax increase will be less than both of those numbers. So for example, let's say the average wages in Tower Hamlets go up by 3%. Therefore, your council tax will go up by less than 3%, maybe let's say 2.8 or 2.9%. What that means is over time, your council tax becomes cheaper as a share of your income, because your income is going up faster than the council taxes. Whereas in previous years, Mayor John Biggs has always increased council tax by, most years by more than average wage increases. So that's one of the things that we can kind of do to keep council tax bills low for people is by linking it to average wage inflation. And obviously we have to look at, obviously different people's wages go up at different levels. So we have to do some work discovering what those wage increases are and try and link, as I said, council tax increases to what people can afford to pay each year. And the other thing, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Councillor. Right now, we have to go for another short break, and we'll be right back after that. By the way, if you're tuning in, don't forget the number to call on this program is 078-524-73473. And don't forget that you can also text in on the same number if you want to have your say on this program. So we're going to go for a short break right now. But before that, don't forget you're tuned into Relax Radio Beyond Frequencies, and this is The Decision with Sean Adams. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Decision with Sean Adams on Relax Radio Beyond Frequencies. This is a special episode of this is a special episode, an election episode, where we are talking to Councillor Andrew Woods, an independent member of the Conservative group for the ward for Canary Wharf. He has joined us to talk about his future, his proposed future of that constituency if he's elected mayor in the upcoming elections. So before we go ahead, I want to remind you, you can also call in on this program if you're listening, and the number is 078-524-73473. So moving on with some more questions. What are some of the changes that you have seen in your council, and how do you rate those changes?
So in terms of the last 4 years, I've been actually we'll talk about the last sort of 8 years, because obviously 5 years, no, it's more than 5 years ago now. I'm losing track of time now. Obviously in 2015 there was a big change because Mayor Lutfer Rahman got replaced by Mayor John Biggs. So to be fair, we went from a council that was providing a reasonably good service under very difficult conditions to a council afterwards which had lots of problems. And it's been very interesting that all of those problems have largely emerged under Mayor John Biggs. And I think it's not like these problems are already there. I think some of these problems were already there, but some of them are definitely kind of new. So some of the problems that we've had in recent years have been, for example, like our financial accounts going back to 2018 haven't been signed off yet, because we brought in new auditors, and basically the more they dug into our financial accounts, the more problems they found. So as it stands in 2022, our accounts for 2018, 2019, and all of the subsequent years still haven't been signed off yet by our auditors. And that puts us in a very difficult financial situation, because it means that our financial base is not entirely solid, because we don't know what they're going to discover. I already talked about failing Ofsted in 2017, and also the Send inspection as well. We didn't do a very kind of good job on that. And, you know, another example is like we have now the worst recycling rates in London, and our recycling rates have actually been dropping for years. So there's some really good graphs, which actually the council themselves produce, which show that in London, recycling has kind of gone up, but it's now kind of going up. But in Tower Hamlets, is actually going down. And we have, as I said, the worst recycling rates in London, and the second worst recycling rates in the whole of United Kingdom. Actually, England, to be precise, I should say England. You know, how did that happen, given that we've got all of this money? So there's just a whole range of areas where the council isn't doing a particularly good job. I got a message earlier today about a child safety issue, and, you know, this parent has written to me with some really horrible stories about things that happened to their daughter, and, you know, just really struggling with the council children's services team, and it just, the problem's not getting resolved. And it was to do with child sexual exploitation, and there was a finding recently by, again, an independent panel that found that we had real problems. Another example is fire safety. So we have the highest number of affected buildings with fire safety problems of anywhere in the United Kingdom by a factor of 2. So we have twice as many buildings with fire safety issues as any other local authority in the country. And that includes local authorities like Birmingham, which are physically much bigger than we are, in part because we've got so many of these new buildings. And, you know, so that's an enormous problem. Livable streets has been a huge problem as well, the way that was implemented, and a division that's caused within our community. Antisocial behaviour. During lockdown, we had the worst antisocial behaviour rates in the country. When you looked at the boroughs or constituencies in terms of the total number of ASB incidents, even though we're not, we haven't got the biggest populations. I could go on and on. Another example would be is that I think I briefly mentioned earlier, we've got these really big reserves, over £500 million. And every year we say we're going to spend X amount on capital. So, for example, one year I think we said we're going to spend, £360 million on capital delivery, but we didn't do it. We never didn't even come close to delivering that much. And we've been saying this for years. Every year we say we're going to deliver this much, and we actually deliver that much. And there are two problems with that. So the first problem is that what we're talking about delivering here is new schools, new NHS GP surgeries, new playgrounds, new homes, new infrastructure like new bridges. So when we're not spending the money, it means we're not delivering all of that infrastructure that people need. And the second problem is that we've got the money to build all of these things. So the money was there, just wasn't being spent. But because we're saving that money in a bank account that's earning, roughly 1% or 1.5%, if your inflation rate is then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6%, as it now is, we're then losing a lot of money through inflation. So I asked the finance team, and they estimated that in the last year, we lost £10.8 million of money through inflation. Over the last 4 years, we've lost somewhere between 30 and 35 million pounds through inflation, because we're in this really strange situation where the council are not spending the money quickly enough. So the money arrives quicker than we're spending it, which then creates these inflationary problems. So if we don't spend the money, it will just get eroded through inflation, eating away at the value of that money, which means therefore we can afford less new homes, less new schools, less new GP surgeries. And that's, the fundamental problem of the council is I was saying earlier, they're not good at delivery, and they're very slow, and they're very bureaucratic. And that's why it has to be a much more delivery focused organization to fix all of these problems.
And on the subject of where's all the money going, in your opinion? What is really causing that disparity? Because you just mentioned that you have over that your council has over 500 million pounds in the bank account. What is preventing that money being channeled into the relevant avenues?
So it's that kind of bureaucracy and the delay. And so I've seen some of the project documents. They just need lots and lots and lots and lots of signatures. So they waste all of this time. Another part of the problem is the biggest project in Tower Hamlets is building the new town hall in Whitechapel. So converting the old Royal London Hospital into this new kind of office building with public facilities. It's our biggest project. It's going to cost, well, we don't know the final cost, but somewhere definitely north of 130 million pounds. And I think part of the problem is because it's such a high profile project, it's like the whole focus of the council for 5 years now has been on their own building. And we have regular meetings talking about our own building and, what the color of the furniture is going to be. And I got an email last week saying, do you want to come to the council to look at the chairs for the new building? But that is all time and attention not spent on looking at building infrastructure that our residents actually need, which is those new schools and kind of all of the rest of it. So I think it's only once that town hall project is complete that maybe will be better. But I think the other part of the problem is that Barking and Dagenham, I mentioned before, they've got their own delivery organization called Be First. It's like this unique organization. It's only focused on delivery. And I think until Tower Hamlets Council copy that, it will become just too bureaucratic. And who takes responsibility for this stuff? And because we don't have enough project managers, and it's not always clear, is that person responsible or is that person responsible? And until that's clear, we're always going to be bad at delivering things.
And also, can I ask you, who is your role model, your inspiration?
So.
Well, not necessarily in the political world, but as a generally speaking.
Yes, I guess. I mean, in terms of my early life, I've already said Lee Kuan Yew, who was a prime minister of Singapore, because I think he was such an extremely accomplished politician, not a perfect politician because he wasn't the most democratic of people. I also grew up with Margaret Thatcher as a prime minister of Great Britain, and yes, she's not perfect. She also caused enormous harm, but she provided leadership. You knew what she was going to do, and she delivered in what she was going to say. And I think that's kind of been part of the problem in more recent years, is that we haven't really had really good leadership in this country. We had Tony Blair, who, if it wasn't for the Iraq War, I think, would have had a much better reputation, because, I don't agree with everything that he actually delivered, but he did deliver a lot of stuff, and did change the country for good or for better. But certainly in terms of recent prime ministers, Theresa May and Boris Johnson, and to some extent David Cameron, I don't get the same sense of really being able to deliver. And it's the same issue that I have with John Biggs as well. Very competent, very capable person, but just not good at delivering stuff for a whole variety of reasons.
A final question, Councillor. Now, we actually invited a number of other councillors as well, Rabina Khan, Luftur Rahman, and so forth, but they were unable to make it. Perhaps they were, otherwise engaged. So I would ask you if you don't mind sharing your opinions with us on your competitors in the upcoming election. For example, and also their policies, because Rabina Khan, for example, is big on climate change. She quotes climate change as one of the key issues that needs to be addressed in the election. And there are, what are your thoughts overall on the competition?
So we have 7 candidates. So the main people obviously are John Biggs, I've just talked about, but the rule of election should be, if you do a good job, you should be re-elected. If you've done a bad job, you should give the job to somebody else. We've then got Lutfur Rahman, very impressive politician. But the problem is that he has not attended any of the husting events. There have been a number of husting events that everybody else has attended, but not Lutfur this. So there's been no opportunity for people to ask him questions in a public format. And that worries me, because he had problems in 2015. He was removed by an election court. So the question I have, and I think it's unanswered, is has he learned from what went wrong in 2010 to 2015 so that he can learn from, from some of, he did make some mistakes. I'm not saying all of them were mistakes. So, will he repeat what he did before or not? And I don't have any sense of that. Councillor Rabina Khan is an extremely impressive politician. I think she's actually the most capable politician and campaigner in Tower Hamlets, and she's been a very good opposition councillor. She's been very successful before in previous mayoral elections, but my sense, my judgment, and I may be wrong in this, is that she won't get into the final 2 as a Liberal Democrat this time. If I'm wrong, I'll have to eat some humble pie. And yes, I mean, climate change is an important issue as well, and there are different things that we can do. And the council have been really slow at delivering. So, for example, the council still don't have any electric-only road vehicles. There are very few electric vehicle chargers in Tower Hamlets. I could spend hours talking at Joanne. I know there's not time to do that, about some of the failures of the existing council when it comes to climate change, because even though they talk about climate change, they don't actually deliver many of the policies required to allow people to make the adaptations required for climate change and reducing our carbon output.
And on that note, Councillor, I would like to thank you very much indeed for joining me on this program. It was such a pleasure talking to you and hearing your opinions, and I wish you the very best of luck in these upcoming elections. And also, to anyone listening in, don't forget, this is, of course, the Decision, a special episode with me, Sean Adams, on Relax Radio Beyond Frequencies, a special election episode where we were talking to Councillor Andrew Woods, who will be standing in as an independent candidate in the upcoming local elections for Tower Hamlets. He is contesting the position of mayor in Tower Hamlets in the upcoming local elections to be held on the 5th of May. So on that note, I will be taking my leave of all of you. Thank you so much for joining me on this program, and I'll see you soon. By the way, don't forget, the number is 078-524-73473 if you want to call us on Relax Radio. And also don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. So it's a goodbye from me. And Councillor, thank you so much for joining me, and goodbye to you too.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you.